5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
My feet go boom, 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 boom. My heart beats boom, 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 boom. Heart speed goes zoom, 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 zoom. My feet go boom, boom, boom. Walking away from you. That's what I'm gonna do. I got the same old shoes with a new attitude. Why would I sing the blues for you? I said, hey, you can't stop me, 'cause my pain, is gasoline. I can't wait for nobody. If you break my heart, it's 1, 2, 3. Boom, boom, boom.
Game of Thrones Season 8 has turned the show into a huge goddamn wreck that has already turned off a number of the fans over the course of its truncated run. With only one more episode to go in the series, it is hard to see how the series can recover, and in fact, some industry sources are already saying that there is nothing that the last 2 episodes can do to prevent Season 8 from becoming the lowest rated season in the series. And in fact, Season 8 deserves all of the hate that it is getting. Now, as long-term visitors to my channel will know, I don't shill for any show, even the shows that I like. At least not much. I call things as I see them, which makes me honest enough even to criticize shows that I like when they make a stupid move. Now, although I am a late fan to Game of Thrones, I started watching in Season 5, I generally followed the show through the next 2 seasons. And as the undead dragon blew a nice gaping hole in the wall, I waited with everyone else in anticipation because Jon Snow was already in the south gaining allies and gathering armies. Then Season 8 rolled around, and it is not 10 episodes, it is 6. 6 episodes to fight the undead hordes from beyond the wall, and then turn around and resolve the contentions with Cersei. Yeah, even before I knew about the shortness of the season, I could tell you that this would not go good. The biggest things that happen in Episode 1 are the arrival of the army and the disclosure of Jon Snow's real heritage. Not a bastard after all, but rather the true king of the 7 kingdoms. At the same time, the scenes build up and everyone prepares. In Episode 2, the biggest events are the spreading of the secret revealed in the previous episode, because secrets are so secret when they are spread to whoever walks across your path. So Sansa tells Tyrion, who later tells Varys, who then starts whining about how Jon Snow could possibly be a better ruler than Dany. Which might be right, but this is on the eve of a major battle. In this case, the Battle of King's Landing, so at that moment your first concern should really be surviving to see the day when this whole argument becomes relevant. And of course, again, the scenes continue to build, and everyone keeps preparing. So, the armies of the undead arrive and the battle begins. There are a lot of things wrong with Episode 3, according to most of the critics. The writers seem to think that they are creating a masterpiece work of fantasy fiction, and this attitude is on display at the end of each episode where the writers go inside the episode and give us snippets of their thought processes. The problem here is that it seems as though not much thought was put into the episode. Most of the scenes are filmed at night, underground, or in darkened buildings, which means the audience gets an excellent view of a darkened screen throughout most of the episode. The defenders' tactics are complete crap. They place ballistas outside of the walls of the keep where they can be easily captured by the enemy. They waste the Dothraki and Unsullied in a futile frontal assault at night when visibility is low against an enemy that does not need light to see clearly. Both of the dragons that Dany has at her disposal are not quite entirely useless, although when the Night King brings in a fog to obscure the scene, it basically puts the dragons out of commission. Most of the defenseless are sent into the crypt, which is a fine move except that the Night King can raise the dead, including the dead inside the crypt, so yay there.
It's terrifying down there. We're in a crypt. Nobody thought of that. He's bringing all the dead people back to life, and they put the women and children in a crypt with all the dead people. So, rah. Tyrion is smart, but I guess not that smart.
Two of the more relevant characters are sent directly to their deaths, although one manages to kill an undead giant while doing so yay girl power, I guess. Jon Snow is pinned down by the undead dragon who is shooting undead blue fire at him, and the only thing he can think to do is shout at it. Meanwhile, Bran, a blind man in a wheelchair, is stuck out in the battlefield pretty much by himself. I don't care what kind of powers Bran has, a person who can only sense shit psychically is still a blind person who is an immense liability, and he is, in fact, at least semi-responsible for one of the quasi-relevant characters marching off to his death. And then there's Arya. I generally like Arya, even if she's not my favorite character on the show. She's been developed over the arc of the show to be a pretty capable assassin. However, in this episode, she's turned into a combination ninja, Thundercat, Spider-Woman character who survives a concussion well enough to sneak out some distance onto the battlefields, sneak through the coterie guarding the Night King, sneak up behind the bastard only to get caught. The Night King hoists Arya up by her neck and is about to crush her skull when her dragon-crafted weapon drops from her left hand to her right and she stabs the Night King, killing him and destroying the entire undead army in a huge display of Deus Ex Arya. Episode 4 is the building up for the next battle, which will take place at King's Landing, because now Dany has to claim her throne from Cersei, who reneged on her deal to send her armies to help Dany and Jon at Winterfell. Because as she said herself,
"This isn't about noble houses. This is about the living and the dead."
And I intend to stay amongst the living. Let the Stark boy and his new queen defend the north. We stay here where we've always been.
Dany, meanwhile, begins or continues her turn to the dark side, depending on how you look at various events. This happens during the dinner celebration as people are toasting Jon Snow and not her.
He keeps fighting. He keeps fighting. He climbed on the fucking dragon and fought. What kind of person climbs on a fucking dragon? A madman or a king?
Perhaps the worst insult to the fans in this season happened when Jon Snow took leave of Winterfell to travel south with the armies. As he was leaving, the Northmen and the Freemen told him that they were heading back north now that the undead threat was over. Jon tells them to take his direwolf friend Ghost with them, as he is more suited to the north. He does not, however, stop to even pet Ghost and tell him goodbye. Having been an animal owner for the past roughly 10 years, I can tell you that this is not how a real friend to an animal would react. The writers missed one of the most basic human feelings in existence, the kinship that a person feels for a companion animal, much less one that has served on a police force or in battle. Ghost is sent away without so much as a pat on the head or "that'll do."
That'll do, pig. That'll do.
Many fans who own companion animals were deeply insulted by this slight. Speaking of companion animals, are supposed to be quite intelligent. They are smart enough to know languages, they can take commands, and they are very important and instrumental on the battlefield. However, one initial mistake Dany apparently makes is that she's left Dragonspear basically undefended, allowing Cersei and the Iron Fleet to reclaim it. Poor Rhaegal pays the price for this underestimation of the enemy.
While Dany kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces, they certainly haven't forgotten about her.
And the Golden Company has arrived in King's Landing, courtesy of the Greyjoy fleet. The balance has grown distressingly even.
While Dany kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces.
We need to find Euron Greyjoy's fleet and sink it.
Your Grace, he's already destroyed a good portion of our fleet.
While Dany kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces.
Your strategy has lost us Dorne, the Iron Islands, and the Reach.
While Dany kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces.
Euron's ships could be anywhere, or in more than one place. He'd be flying around the open seas alone for who knows how long.
I wouldn't be alone. I would have Drogon, Viserion, and Rhaegal. What can anyone do to them?
While Dany kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces, they certainly haven't forgotten about her.
People continue to underestimate Cersei, including just how evil she is. When she orders Missandei's beheading, it proves that the whole thing has become personal, and Dany's journey to the dark side continues. Episode 5 does a very few things before dropping us into the Battle of King's Landing. First, we have the unnecessary execution of Varys, who is plotting against Dany and for Jon. At this point, who the hell cares? After the battle, you can take steps to win a person like him over. If you win the battle first, of course. The Battle of King's Landing is unfortunate, especially for those killed in the destruction rained down from the skies as Dany and her lone remaining dragon carry out the Game of Thrones version of the Dresden bombing on the city and its inhabitants. But the writers had the audacity to say that Dany was motivated to launch this genocidal attack on the city and its people after seeing the Red Keep, and being reminded of what was taken from her and her family. However, earlier in this same episode,
Let it be fear.
They're not your enemies. They're innocents, like the ones you liberated in Marine.
In Marine, the slaves turned on the masters and liberated the city themselves the moment I arrived.
They're afraid. Anyone who resists Cersei will see his family butchered. You can't expect them to be heroes. They're hostages.
They are. In a tyrant's grip, whose fault is that? Mine.
What does it matter whose fault it is? Thousands of children will die if the city burns.
Your sister knows how to use her enemy's weaknesses against them. That's what she thinks our mercy is. Weakness.
I beg you, my queen.
She's wrong. Mercy is our strength. Our mercy towards future generations. He will never again be held hostage by a tyrant.
And Tyrion told Dany that if the church bells began to chime and if the gates of the city were opened, the city was surrendering. So the writers were bullshitting us, trying to give Dany some justification for the slaughter that ensued. And actually, I don't have much of a problem with the firebombing of the city. If you're the invading army, the objective is to overwhelm the enemy, destroy people, break things, and take the center of power. As Cersei watched, Dany and her remaining dragon laid waste to the city. She had to be seeing that her reign as queen was coming to a fiery end. To me, when Dany looked over at the Red Keep, she was seeing her final objective. She had to take down the Red Keep and depose Cersei, and there was no going around it. Since she could not be sure of what resistance her army might face, she went with the General William T. Sherman approach, when the U.S. Civil War general carved a path of destruction from Atlanta to Savannah, Georgia, with the aim of defeating the will of the general public to keep up the fight. Okay, so what next? The consensus seems to be that Dany will be killed, possibly by an enraged Jon Snow, while an equally enraged Tyrion stands next to him. However, I have since learned that there is a 7th episode to follow the series, a sort of epilogue that might explain things further. I hope that 2 things are done, if Dany's truly going to die within these next 2 productions. First, I would hope that she is given at least a chance to explain why she did what she did, and that sounds like a thing that would easily be done within the final episode. To not do so simply degrades Dany as a character to the point where we are almost talking about a medieval sort of Hitler figure, which I don't think was the case. The second thing I hope they do is I hope they do not go at this from the 21st century point of view, that what Dany did was wrong because it's a war crime, and so on and so forth. How many times throughout history have cities been sacked or razed to the ground? Carthage, Rome, Jerusalem, Troy, Alexandria, and so on throughout history, to the point that in the 20th century we had cities such as Coventry, Dresden, Berlin, Tokyo, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki destroyed in warfare. We might have felt badly after the deed was done, and we might have conceived conventions against these acts ever happening again, but while the war was raging, we had no problem with destroying cities and burning out lives. And so I hope they don't hamstring Dany by our modern constraints. In the end, it was not a badly produced series of episodes, this final season. It was, however, badly written, in part because it was so rushed, and this made things feel forced and unreal. I would hope that future writers would take this as an example of how not to do a series, and write at a slow enough pace to allow the fans to truly enjoy and get immersed in the world that the writers are trying to create. Okay, so now that the flaming dumpster fire that was the final episode of Game of Thrones, at least for now, is rolling free down the streets of the fandom, having been seen on Sunday evening, let's take a look at the episode itself and the motivations and actions for all involved. I must state at the outset that I found a spoiler post that claimed to be 100% correct, and I read it, and I became convinced that I would not like the episode, and it would be unsatisfying to most of the fans. It turns out I was right. The episode took a lot of time with nothing but filler. If you came into the episode within the first 15 minutes, you didn't miss much. Hell, you could have skipped through the first 40 minutes and still got to see Dany's death. After that, more dumb filler scenes throughout most of the rest of the episode, scenes that didn't make much sense. One break in the monotony happens when Jon Snow comes upon Grey Worm and a group of Unsullied who are about to execute some Lannister forces, apparently on the orders of Dany to, quote, kill her enemies. Jon tries to stop them and nearly comes to blows over it, but mutters that he will talk to the Queen and walks off, allowing Grey Worm to slash the throats of the surrendered soldiers. Somehow, if Jon had pressed the issue without drawing his sword, he could have probably demanded that Grey Worm go report to Dany. Tyrion also made the zombie walk through the city until he got to the Red Keep, where he takes a walk through the place and discovers the rock pile covering his siblings. He continues and eventually finds Dany shortly after she's landed with Drogon. She makes a speech to the assembled armies and tells them basically that she intends to take the war to unite the entire world. I was like, uh-oh. Arya meets up with Jon and reminds him that Sansa in the north will not respect Dany, and given his true heritage, he is the biggest threat to her, and she knows it. Meanwhile, Tyrion confronts Dany, who accuses him of freeing his brother and therefore being treasonous. He pointedly replies that she burned down a city before taking his hand of the queen pin and throwing it down the stairs.
You freed your brother. You committed treason.
I freed my brother. And you slaughtered a city.
Dany has him thrown in jail. Jon visits Tyrion, who challenges him to make the difference in the situation. However, he also pointed out Dany's violent history. And before we go too much further, there's also the case that Tyrion himself at one point threatened the entire city of King's Landing during his trial.
I wish I was the monster you think I am. I wish I had enough poison for the whole pack of you. I would gladly give my life to watch you all swallow it. Samarin!
Despite what he said, which was both good and bad, I do not feel that Tyrion convinced Jon to turn on Dany, but he made it closer.
She murdered the slavers of Astapor. I'm sure no one but the slavers complained. After all, they were evil men. When she crucified hundreds of Myronese nobles, who could argue they were evil men? The Dothraki carls she burned alive, they would have done worse to her. Everywhere she goes, evil men die, and we cheer her for it. And she grows more powerful and more sure that she is good and right.
Jon then confronted Dany in the throne room, trying to get her to give some defense on what she had did, or at the very least promise that it would not happen again. It seemed as though Dany might be making the point until Jon asked her about what everyone else who was not them thought about what was right. Dany replied that the decision was not theirs, and I thought, uh-oh.
What about everyone else? All the other people who think they know what's good.
They don't get to choose.
Shortly after that, Jon hugs Dany and then stabs her, killing her without a word from either one of them. Jon is thrown in jail for the murder of Dany instead of being killed outright right then and there by either Drogon, who comes in and takes her body away, or the Unsullied or Grey Worm, who would have been justified in killing him outright. Given time for everyone to assemble, the lords and ladies of Westeros gather to talk about the fate of things. Tyrion is brought out, and he basically starts telling everybody what they should be doing. He suggests Bran as the new king, and he then tries to suggest that he is not the person for the king's hand. The assembled nobles almost unanimously agree to the suggestion of Bran as king, but refers to him as Bran the Broken, rather than Bran the Wise or Bran the Just, which is a really stupid move. Jon is sentenced by Bran to go back to the Wall and take the Black. He gets reunited with Ghost and pets him, and takes a group of wildlings north of the Wall. Arya heads out across the Western Sea to explore. Meanwhile, Tyrion and the King's Council meet and start getting to business, which in this case is the rather mundane matter of what to pay for in the rebuilding efforts in King's Landing. Now to the main problems with this episode. Tyrion had it exactly right about when and why Dany kills people. Up until this point, Dany has killed people who were truly bad apples, which does two things. First, yes, she does this for justice and for freeing people and such. But at the same time, she has a streak of ruthlessness that has always been there. Now, as I said earlier, the role of the army is to kill people and break things, and you keep doing that until you secure the objective, which in this case was the overthrow of the crown and the toppling of Cersei and her army. gave Dany her murderous rampage as the actions of a commander doing what was needed to subdue the populace. However, she could have just as easily had taken Drogon and carved a path of destruction from her perch on the wall as the bell started to ring directly to the Red Keep, minimizing the damage that she could have caused. But she didn't, thus cementing her fall to the dark side. After this was done, I will even give her first mistake, announcing to the assembled armies that she intends to take the fight back to the rest of the world.
In vrappa tolvio viognin rondirederat. Tolvrio pregelat. En winter velva dornat. En laniso valiniot. En gyro geerot. Avar, Valar, Rinjar, Tole Gregovobotis, Grevi in Noma Pregelat!
To me, that is something that might be normal, especially in the heat of the moment. It is similar to when a president is running for office and he promises this and that. However, once he is in office, the advisors who have been in government a while take him aside and tell him what he will actually be able to do. The same thing could have been done here. "I'm going to free the world," Dany could shout, but then her advisors could say, "Well, yeah, but we don't have the ships or the men for that." It would have also been easy for Jon to have cut Dany off after she said that everyone does not get to decide what is right.
What about everyone else? All the other people who think they know what's good.
They don't get to choose.
He could have responded with, "Well, yes they do, and you've always wanted and fought for this." He could have then volunteered to be sort of a co-ruler, and to be her conscience for when and if she needed it. This would have started the process of giving her back wise and sage counsel, which any king in existence ever has had to have, if they don't want to be at least seen as tyrants. And also would have kept Jon Snow a potential rival right where she could keep track of him. Again, folks, the writing was rushed. The writers only gave themselves 6 episodes to wrap all this up, where they should have at least taken at least double that time. If they had wanted Dany to be the complete Darth Vader-like villain that she eventually turned out to be, they should have at least been building up for this for at least the last 2 seasons. As it was, we have not only disappointment and resentment on the part of the fans, but mixed feelings on the part of the cast members as well. So here are some of the elements that have gone into the failure of a number of things in the last couple of seasons of Game of Thrones. How these things could have been fixed, and the back and forth between the fans and some of the cast members since the last episode of the Game of Thrones was aired. First, we have some fixes. And the first fix is with Daenerys Targaryen. I don't buy that Targaryen blood makes a person more prone to insanity any more than I would buy that Aryan blood makes anyone more superior to anyone else. However, Dany has been subjected to a rough life, growing up as a Targaryen and being forced into a marriage with Drogo, the war chief of the Dothraki hordes. This teaches her that in order to be kind and merciful, she must first survive, and in order to survive, you often have to be ruthless and strong. Dany has taken these lessons to heart, and she embraces the ruthlessness of the Dothraki after they murder her brother, and as she walks upon her journey, we see clear signs at almost every turn that she has both tremendous good and tremendous evil within her.
Khaleesi, please. You said you'd never leave Karth alive.
Come. Nothing.
Thank you for teaching me this lesson.
I am King of Karth. I can help you now. Truly help you. We can take the Iron Throne. I'll bring you a thousand shares. All the dreams is within your reach.
She is equally known as both the Breaker of Chains as well as the Breaker of the Wheel, and she will use her abilities both for good and evil in the service of her goals. When Jon informs Dany about his true heritage, she is happy. What a better way to rule the lands than as with two members of the Targaryen dynasty on the throne at the same time. While each of these dual rulers may have their own areas of specialty, they both agree to abide by each other's decisions. The series ends, for now, with both Jon and Dany on the throne, having crushed Cersei and her forces between them, and with Drogon looking in at the throne room from the hole in the wall that was blown behind the throne. And for those who do not like this ending, they can always take solace from the idea that the Dragon Kingdom will be back in a sequel series that goes into a possible conquest of Essos. A darker version of the story has Dany waiting a while before giving the speech to the assembled armies. She lands with Drogon and approaches the crowd of military, Dothraki, and what remains of the city's populace. Drogon does his really cool wing thingy and flies off. Dany speaks, and she gives virtually the same speech with the following added bit. Quote, I am Daenerys Targaryen, the bringer of storms, the mother of dragons, the breaker of chains, and the sunderer of the wheel. These are all nice and fancy titles, but what do they all mean? As I look around at this city, reduced to ash, I am reminded of that terrible aspect of my family's lineage. We are Targaryen, and we have brought a great city to its knees, and we can do this to any city we wish. That I promise you. However, I have also learned through wise counsel that our beasts, our worst natures, can be tamed, bent, and shaped to our will. We are all human, and as humans we can decide to do this. We can decide that we are not going to kill or destroy today, and that's all it takes. Deciding that we are not going to kill today. And yes, I got that last bit from Captain Kirk. But I think it works here.
You realize what you have done?
Yes, I do. I've given you back the horrors of war. The Vendikins will now assume that you've broken your agreement and that you're preparing to wage real war with real weapons. They'll want to do the same. Only the next attack they launch will do a lot more than just count up numbers on a computer. They'll destroy your cities, devastate your planet. You, of course, will want to retaliate. If I were you, I'd start making bombs. Yes, Councilman, you have a real war on your hands. You can either wage it with real weapons, or you might consider an alternative. Put an end to it. Make peace.
There can be no peace. Don't you see? We've admitted it to ourselves. We're a killer species. It's instinctive. It's the same with you. Your General Order 24.
All right. It's instinctive. The instinct can be fought. We're human beings with the blood of a million savage years on our hands. But we can stop it. We can admit that we're killers, but we're not going to kill today. That's all it takes. Knowing that we're not going to kill today. Contact Vendikar. I think you'll find that they're just as terrified, appalled, horrified as you are. That they'll do anything to avoid the alternative I've given you. Peace or utter destruction. It's up to you.
Dany has demonstrated that untamed might that is at her command, but the idea that she doesn't always have to use it has always been there. In reminding the people that she does not intend to always resort to the most damaging action available, she might just redeem herself in the eyes of Tyrion and Jon and survive the series finale. Now we go to Bran. This one is easy.
Stop! Stop!
Are you completely mad?
He saw us.
It's all right. It's all right. It's all right.
He saw us.
I heard you the first time. Quite the little climb, aren't you? How old are you, boy?
10.
10. The things I do for love.
Bran is shoved out of the window of the tower in the first episode of the series and he dies. Jaime and Cersei flee, which of course draws suspicion upon them by the grieving Starks. This exacerbates the tensions and outright conflict between the great houses, but in reality the whole thing can be wrapped up by the end of the first season. Ned Stark still dies, and Cersei agrees to testify about what happened in front of a tribunal headed up by her son, King Joffrey Baratheon. Even though Cersei explains that the whole thing was Jaime's fault, Joffrey pardons both of them for any crimes that they may have committed. Now we go to Jon Snow. Jon still discovers his lineage when Sam Tarly reveals it. However, he spends season 8 being less of a butthurt, lovesick puppy, and more of the hero we expect from him. Despite the revelation, he still beds Dany because he still loves her, and incest is not as taboo as it is now. Given our other fixes, he either rules the Seven Kingdoms alongside Dany, or he becomes her conscience as she rules alone, or perhaps both. Nonetheless, he still takes trips up to the Wall in order to make sure that things there are taken care of, because he feels a special responsibility to those people that he served with. Then we have Jaime Lannister. Every villain needs a good henchman, and that's what Jaime is here. He is seen betting his boss in the first episode of the series, and almost never leaves her side after that. Over the course of the series, Jaime is Cersei's enforcer or agent. As such, a lot of what happens in the series can be seen as the various schemes that she has to resort to attain more power. And when the Sept takes that away from her and humiliates her, she plots to take back power and gain revenge at the same time. One website said that the writers ruined Cersei's character because she is always known for being somewhat subtle, when in fact, she has always been known for scheming and getting her revenge. And if the act of revenge screamed her name, so fucking what? Jaime could have been seen skulking around the Sept before the wildfire explosion. And how do we know that it was not Jaime who put the poison in Joffrey's drink as part of Cersei's plan to frame Tyrion?
Joffrey!
Poisoned my son, your king. Take him. Take him! Take him! Take him!
For Arya, first remove most of her plot armor, as it starts getting applied in Season 6 when she survives this.
Sweet girl.
By the time Season 8 rolled around, Arya had gone from simply being proficient with a sword to being a damn capable assassin, but even all of that should not have allowed her to not only survive a battle on the size and scale of the Battle of Winterfell, but also be the one person to deal the lethal blow to the Night King. Second, despite all of the build-up throughout the series with Arya having her list...
Sheldon, I know you're a bit of a left-handed monkey wrench, but... You really have a mortal enemy?
Oh, in fact, I have 61 of them. Would you like to see the list?
Oh, say no, say no, say no, say no.
You just got off the list. Would you like back on it?
In the final episode, as Clegane is heading toward his date with Destiny and his fight against his brother, he turns to Arya and tells her not to follow him because she might die and because she would not want to turn out to be like him. Sorry, pal, that ship's already sailed.
Where'd you steal this from?
What do you care?
I leave in 2 days. You can have a hammock in steerage.
I want a cabin, and we'll leave at dawn. See you at sunrise.
For Arya to simply decide to give up on scoring that last hit on her list when she is right downstairs from Cersei is bafflingly stupid of the show writers. But then she walks out from the Red Keep and walks through King's Landing while the city is still under attack from the air by Drogon, who is incinerating everything in his path. No, the correct ending for Arya, in my opinion, is, again, she tells Clegane that her path is fixed, and has been for a long time. She then accompanies him into the tower, but as they hear people approaching, she slips into one of the alcoves along the way. Clegane sees his brother and approaches. Clyburn tells Gregor to continue to guard the queen, but he kills the man just like he did in the series. While Sandor and Gregor square off, Cersei continues down the stairway, only to be met by Arya, who kills her. Assuming that Jaime makes it toward the tower because he has not yet found Cersei, he too could be killed by Arya, who would then be making her way out of the Red Keep. Tyrion Lannister is perhaps the biggest victim of the bad writing of Seasons 7 and 8. He was at one time a pretty shrewd political brinksman.
My mother's been looking for you. You ride for King's Landing today.
Before you go, you will call on Lord and Lady Stark and offer your sympathies.
What good will my sympathies do then?
None, but it is expected of you. Your absence has already been noted.
The boy means nothing to me. Oh, I can't stand the wailing of women.
One word, and I hit you again.
I'm telling Mother.
Go. Tell her. But first you will get to Lord and Lady Stark, and you will fall on your knees in front of them and tell them how very sorry you are, that you are at their service and that all your prayers are with them. Do you understand?
You can't.
Do you understand?
The Prince will remember that, little lord.
I hope so. If he forgets, be a good dog and remind him.
If you want Robb Stark to hear us, we're going to have to speak louder.
What is the meaning of this?
What kind of knight beats a helpless girl?
The kind who serves his king, imp.
Careful now. We don't want to get blood all over your pretty white cloak.
Someone get the girl something to cover herself with.
She's to be your queen. Have you no regard for her honor?
I'm punishing her.
For what crimes? She should not fight her brother's battle, you half-wit.
You can't talk to me like that. The king can do as he likes.
The Mad King did as he liked. Has your Uncle Jaime ever told you what happened to him?
No one threatens his grace in the presence of the King's Guard.
I'm not threatening the king, sir. I am educating my nephew. Braun, the next time Sir Merwin speaks, kill him. That was a threat. See the difference?
Now, in their rush to get out the door, D&D turned Tyrion into such a bumbling fool that not only did the fans notice it, but the characters noticed it.
Your strategy has lost us Dawn, the Iron Islands, and the Reach.
And the cast members themselves noticed it.
So, Tyrion is smart, but I guess not that smart.
So the best thing to fix Tyrion would be that he does not become an imbecile at the end of the series. Now, given my own preferred storyline, the meeting at the Dragon Pit in episode 6 would not have happened. But if it had happened, Tyrion would not have suggested the council solution with the Token King that he did in the series. Instead, he would have stated that the downfall of Daenerys Targaryen shows that the wheel cannot be broken. It is therefore up to them, the king, the king's hand, and the small council to make sure that everything runs right within the kingdom. To do this, there must be a certain amount of coordination and cooperation at all levels, and this will bring the great houses together in a sort of mutual kinship, as one territory helps solve the problems of another, and the crown is there to coordinate the efforts and pay for things that might come up that the needy house might not be able to afford. The reason this is necessary is something that I will address shortly with the help of Alternate History Hub. These are just some of the fixes we could do to make the story better, and I could go further. The point is to demonstrate that even without any college education in entertainment or movie production, myself, with only my imagination and a love of both history and role-playing games, and college degrees in history and psychology, could come up with a better storyline in a few minutes than two supposed ace writers did in months, if not years. Benny Hoffenweiss basically phoned in the last couple seasons of Game of Thrones. Now, some in the fan community have said that D&D did not do this as a means to get to Star Wars, because the deal for that trilogy was signed a couple of years ago. No, guys, it's not that they were in a hurry to sign the deal, they were in a hurry to wrap up Game of Thrones so that they could get to working on that deal. The next Star Wars trilogy is set to go off in 2022, so despite the fact that they had enough time for at least one more season of Game of Thrones, D&D ended the series early. The cast and crew of Game of Thrones was split by the ending and the fan reaction to it. Emilia Clarke has said that she was so shocked when she got the script for Season 8 after she landed at Heathrow Airport that she had to take some time and walk off her emotions. That tells me that she was unhappy. You don't generally need to walk off happy emotions.
And are you happy with how things ended? Yeah. She didn't say yes. You didn't say yes.
Best season ever!
If you could describe the season finale of Game of Thrones in one word, how would you describe it?
Disappointing.
Disappointing?
No, epic. I don't know.
Epic.
One of those ones.
How do you feel about the way that it ends?
There are no better writers in television than Dan Weiss and David Benioff. They ended it brilliantly, better than I could have imagined, and you people are in for it. You people are in for it.
Peter Dinklage gave what seemed to be a hostage statement to the reporters, and there are others. Once the show was ended and they could actually review their feelings, the cast went further. As fan protests grew, some of the cast members reacted to the fans in a manner that showed that they did not really get why the fans were so upset. So this following is meant for Kit Harington and Sophie Turner. Before I say anything else, let me say that the acting, the artistry, the special effects, the musical score, the world building, and many other aspects of the series, including the 8th season, were pretty much the best ever done in television. Game of Thrones was a series of movie masterpieces made for television. The only real exception to all of this is the 3rd episode of the 8th season, where the lighting for the epic Battle of Winterfell was basically non-existent. Rather, the fans have been reacting to the shoddy writing that made other cast members pause. Let's put it this way. Pick your favorite dining establishment in your location. You go there often, and the food is pretty good. However, after a while, you notice a decline in the food and the service, and you stop leaving a tip. The service and quality continues to decline, and you complain to the management. The decline continues, and you leave a bad review on a website, and perhaps talk to the manager again. The decline continues, and finally you are disgusted enough to stop dining there. Kit and Sophie, this is what the fans are doing. They are lodging a complaint with the management, in this case HBO, saying that the writing done by D&D for Season 8 was so rushed, you can almost feel the gusts of wind through the television. Now, most people are realistic enough to know that HBO is not about to invest the time and money to redo the entire 8th season, but they are going to register their discontent anyways, and they are free to do so. So, to Kit and Sophie, no one cares what you think about the fans, no one cares that you think the fans should go fuck themselves, and no one cares that you think that the fans are being rude because your feelings are hurt. The fans don't care. Yet. However, if you insist on sniping at fans who are simply speaking their minds on the downward quality of the story behind Season 8, and how D&D have hidden under their desks as they scurry out of the building and head off to ruin Star Wars, I am sure that some of the fans would be more than happy to return fire, and some of them can be quite mean about it. So basically, shut your fucking holes and stay in your lanes. So, with Tyrion's guidance, the hastily assembled Council of Nobles decides that the lands of Westeros, with the exception of the North, will be ruled by one man. In this first case, Bran Stark, or Bran the Broken. He will be forbidden to marry or have children, so there will be no dynasty to fight over. Once Bran dies, the Council will meet again and choose the next king, and the process will repeat itself. Sounds like a good solution, right? As we'll see, not so good.
Season 8 was a thing that existed. With the gang going over the wall, I kind of expected we wouldn't get the satisfying grand conclusion to this epic tale, but wow.
I expect nothing, and I'm still let down.
Yeah, so here we are. Game of Thrones will be looked back on just like the Hindenburg. Nobody remembers the big floating marvel of human engineering. All anyone remembers is...
How does it feel to have lived long enough to see all of your favorite franchises go down in flames?
Feels great.
Season 8's writing failed in literally every way. Pacing, dialogue, consistency. I just want to talk about the ending of the show. The new state of the world that was decided as a good conclusion to the series. Now, I don't do videos like this, but my god. One scene. The council meeting in the Dragon Pit. That broke me. Bran becomes king. Future kings will be elected in a vote by the richest, most powerful lords of Westeros. The North becomes its own separate kingdom. All of this is meant to be a good thing, and in no way will it ever backfire. Bran is king. The wheel is broken, and everything is fixed. This is what I think the ending was meant to symbolize from the writer's standpoint. Tyrion is supposed to be the smartest character of them all, so as a person of intelligence, he comes up with a solution that resolves all conflict in Westeros. The main cause of the last 8 years of war was lineage. So just remove the birthright and problem solved. Yay, why didn't we think of this before? Just have the most powerful lords of all the now 6 kingdoms, all with different motivations, decide who should be king. They can even nominate themselves. What could go wrong? Tyrion, the man who spent his entire life seeing the dealings and political backstabbings of Westerosi lords, thought it'd be a great idea to let them decide amongst themselves who becomes king.
Tyrion is smart, but I guess not that smart.
By their own rules that Westeros has operated off of, and simply common sense, this should be seen as a horrendous idea. First, Bran himself. Who would follow Bran the Broken? Who would even know who he is? Is it even common knowledge that he has psychic powers? Would people in the South even know this? Because to them, all they saw was Cersei on the throne get obliterated by Dany, and then some unrelated kid be nominated by Dragon Hitler's former hand. That certainly wouldn't stand. But we're stuck with this voting system now, so great. Democracy. Kinda. I guess. D&D really did just forget the rest of Westeros other than King's Landing in Winterfell. Bronn becoming Lord of the Reach is the most hilarious and depressing outcome of all of this. Bronn, the sellsword, who doesn't even have a last name, now controls the most populous region in Westeros, surpassing the minor houses who have ruled in the Reach for thousands of years. Yeah, okay. So just cause it's funny and I hate myself, let's say Bronn remains in power in the Reach. His house is now the equivalent of House Tyrell.
You see, I'd never seen the poison work before. Tell Cersei. I wanted to know it was me.
What's to stop the larger kingdoms, like the Reach, now ruled by, let's call it, House Blackwater, from pushing their political might on the smaller kingdoms, like the Stormlands or Westerlands, in their favor? They control a lot of resources. The Reach supplies most of the other kingdoms with wheat, wine, and livestock. Might be a bit inconvenient for a hungry population if that supply was just to stop because a certain lord didn't vote for House Blackwater. It isn't even just the Reach. Any large kingdom only has one simple step in their way to gain absolute power. 4 votes and you're king. If a lord wasn't powerful enough to get votes, he'd certainly support a lord from a house he's allied with. Political marriages, already very important, are now the best ticket to potentially getting on the throne. Every time a king is now on the brink of death, the lords of Westeros will compete against one another to make sure they, or at least an ally with their interests, get onto the throne. What a stable system that certainly won't descend into war every human lifetime. Not like we'd really need to worry about that, because you know what really sets a good precedent? Allowing the North to become a separate kingdom in front of 2 other kingdoms who have a history of rebelling. Yara was promised that the Iron Islands would become independent by Dany, yet doesn't even bring it up. Okay.
One of the biggest problems with the solution to the series is that it ignores a basic facet of humanity. People will almost always fight over politics and religion. Therefore, the wheel cannot be broken. And we can take alternate history hub's points further, because while there may certainly be bribery, conflict, and strife over the succession to the throne, there will also be similar bribery, conflict, and strife over the various seats on the council. While the king cannot marry or have a family, that does not prevent the members of the council from doing so. So, all the fighting simply moves one level down on the totem pole and keeps going. The Game of Thrones will be in full session, and as Cersei said, you either win or die while playing it. Another issue is that some of the states in Westeros contain various resources, allowing them to rig the vote, so to speak. Alternate History Hub mentions the Reach, with its large population and rich agricultural lands, but another possible contender might be what is left of the Lannister holdings in the Westlands. That area of the continent is known for its rich mineral resources. In fact, House Lannister was basically made from the gold mines in the area. So basically, the Westlands can buy off the Reach, and the 2 can form a solid voting bloc to defend their interests. The problem then becomes the other 4 territories. If you had a crisis, say a famine, the Reach is the most able to feed itself, and they are most able to store up supplies. The Westlands can buy food from the Reach, and the rest of the territories are in various states of hurt, especially Dorne, which is comprised mostly of desert. If there was going to be a solution to this, it would be that more countries need to be added to the council to dilute the power of the Reach and the Westlands. This would mean that the North comes back into the kingdoms, and Jon Snow forms a nation north of the Wall and gets a seat on the council. Then, not only does this give the Crown Lands a 3-seat voting bloc, only needing 1 more to get a tie, but this 3-seat voting bloc would, at least for now, also be in the same family, making their alliance even stronger. Whichever way it goes, there's more than enough room for a Game of Thrones sequel, as long as it is not written by D&D.